I'm Anna, and this is the story of how my own family tried to steal my home from me. But to understand how things got so messed up, you need to know where it all began. My earliest memories are pretty happy ones. We lived in a modest house, nothing fancy, but it was filled with love. Mom would bake cookies with me on weekends, and Dad would take me to the park every chance he got. They weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. Then came that awful day. I was playing with my dolls when Mom got the phone call. I didn't understand what was happening at first, just that Mom was crying harder than I'd ever seen anyone cry before. Dad had a heart attack at work. Just like that, he was gone. Things started changing fast after that. Within months, Mom met Tom. I remember the first time she brought him home. "Anna, honey, this is my friend Tom," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "He's going to have dinner with us tonight." I didn't like him from the start. There was something cold in his eyes when he looked at me, like I was some kind of problem he needed to solve. But Mom seemed different around him. She started smiling again, laughing even. And soon they were married. I was trying my best to adjust to having a new person in our house when Mom dropped another bombshell: she was pregnant. That's when everything really fell apart. I remember overhearing them arguing late one night. I was supposed to be asleep, but I'd snuck out to get a glass of water. "I didn't sign up to raise someone else's kid," Tom was saying, his voice harsh and angry. "We're going to have our own baby soon. I'm not wasting my time and money on her." "But she's my daughter," Mom protested weakly. "Then let your in-laws take her," he snapped. "They've got money, they can handle it. We need to focus on our own family now." I stood there in the dark hallway, my small hands shaking, as I listened to my mother's silence. That silence said everything. She was choosing him over me. A few days later, Mom sat me down and tried to explain that I was going to live with Grandma and Grandpa, my dad's parents. She made it sound like some great adventure, but even at 6 years old, I knew what was really happening. I was being thrown away to make room for their new family. "Will I still see you, Mommy?" I asked, trying not to cry. "Of course, sweetheart," she promised. "You can visit whenever you want." But as I packed my little suitcase with my favorite stuffed animals and clothes, I had this feeling in my gut that nothing would ever be the same again. I was right. Moving in with my grandparents changed everything. They legally adopted me, and honestly, they became more like parents to me than my own mother ever was. Their house was beautiful, nothing crazy fancy, but definitely comfortable, with a big backyard where I could play and a room all to myself. I remember the first time I met my half-sister, Ruby. Mom was holding this tiny baby, cooing and fawning over her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Anna, meet your little sister," Mom said, beaming. "Isn't she beautiful?" I just stood there, not knowing what to say. All I could think was how I'd never seen Mom look at me that way, like I was her whole world. The visits were always awkward. Tom made it crystal clear I wasn't welcome. He'd literally stay in his bedroom the entire time I was there, not even bothering to say hello. Sometimes I'd hear him moving around upstairs, and the sound of his footsteps made my stomach knot up. As Ruby grew older, the contrast between our treatments became even more obvious. Every time I visited, I'd see new toys in her room, hear stories about their family vacations, watch them act like this perfect little family, with me as the obvious outsider. "Mom, can I stay for dinner?" I'd sometimes ask. "Oh, well," she'd always look uncomfortable, glancing upstairs where Tom was hiding. "Maybe next time, sweetie." Tom's had a long day at work. By middle school, I couldn't take it anymore. The rejection was too painful, the message too clear, I wasn't part of their family. So I stopped going. Just stopped. After that, Mom would come to Grandma and Grandpa's house once a year on my birthday, usually with a gift that felt more like an obligation than something chosen with love. Sometimes she'd bring Ruby, who'd look around our house with wide eyes, clearly uncomfortable. Tom never came, not once. But you know what? My grandparents made sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything. They were at every school play, every award ceremony, every parent-teacher conference. Grandpa taught me to play chess and helped me with my math homework. Grandma showed me how to bake and told me stories about my dad when he was young. When it came time for college, they didn't hesitate to pay for my tuition at one of the best schools in the country. I studied computer science, threw myself into programming, and graduated with honors. Right after graduation, I landed a job with a major software company, working remotely from my grandparents' house. The money was incredible, way more than I'd expected to make right out of college. Within a couple of years, I had enough saved up for a down payment on my own place. That's when I made what I now realize was a huge mistake. I decided to buy an apartment in the same city where Mom lived. I had this fantasy, you see. I thought if I lived closer, maybe we could finally have the relationship I'd always wanted. Maybe if she saw how successful I'd become, she'd finally be proud of me. Maybe she'd finally choose me. I still remember the day I got the keys to my new apartment. Standing in the empty space, watching sunlight stream through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I felt like I'd finally made it. The place was everything I'd dreamed of, on the 20th floor of a luxury high-rise, with views that took your breath away. I spent weeks making it perfect, picking out modern furniture, coordinating with designers, choosing every detail myself. When everything was ready, I took a deep breath and made the call I'd been both dreading and looking forward to. "Mom, I'd love for you to come see my new place. Maybe this Saturday?" There was a pause on the other end. "New place? You bought an apartment?" "Yeah, I did. I'd really like you, Tom, and Ruby to come for a housewarming dinner." Another pause. "Well, I suppose we could do that." The day they arrived, I had everything perfect. I'd cooked a fancy dinner, bought expensive wine, even put fresh flowers everywhere. When I opened the door, their jaws literally dropped. Ruby, now 19 and in college herself, pushed past everyone. "Holy shit," she breathed, spinning around to take it all in. "This is insane." Mom's eyes were huge as she walked through the living room, running her hand over my Italian leather sofa. "Anna, this must have cost a fortune." Tom just stood there, his face getting redder by the minute. The questions started over dinner. "How much did this place cost?" Mom kept asking. "What kind of salary are you making? Does your company pay you that well?" I deflected every question. But they wouldn't let up. I could feel their eyes on everything, the high-end appliances in the kitchen, the designer light fixtures, the smart home system I'd had installed. Their looks weren't admiring though, they were calculating. Predatory even. Tom barely touched his food, just sat there getting more and more agitated. "Must be nice," he finally muttered, "having everything handed to you on a silver platter." I nearly choked on my wine. "Excuse me?" "Well, your grandparents paid for your fancy college, didn't they? Set you up real nice." Before I could respond, Mom jumped in with forced cheerfulness. "This is lovely, Anna. Really lovely." They left early, making excuses about traffic. I stood in my beautiful apartment afterward, feeling somehow dirty, like their envy had left a film over everything. 3 days later, Mom called. "We'd love to have you over for dinner this time," she said, sounding oddly excited. "There's some news we want to share." I should have known something was up, but like an idiot, I went. And that's when they dropped the bomb. "Ruby's pregnant," Mom announced over pot roast. "She and her boyfriend are getting married." I sat there at the dinner table, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, waiting for Mom to ask for wedding money. That would have been bad enough. But what happened next? I still can't believe their audacity. Tom cleared his throat, putting down his knife and fork with deliberate slowness. "You know, Anna, that apartment of yours is in a really good location." "Yeah?" I said cautiously. "Right next to that new kindergarten." "And the elementary school's what, 2 blocks away?" I nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. "Perfect setup for a young family," he continued, his voice taking on a salesman's tone that made my skin crawl. "Lots of space, good neighborhood." It would be just right for Ruby and her baby. I blinked, thinking I must have misunderstood. What do you mean? Well, he leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Since you're doing so well for yourself, making all that money, living the high life, you should give your apartment to Ruby. The room went dead silent. I waited for someone to laugh, to say they were joking. Nobody did. Give my apartment to Ruby? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You can easily buy another place, Tom continued, like he was discussing the weather. Ruby's fiancé can barely afford rent right now. They need a proper home for the baby. And since you're so well off, Mom chimed in, giving me that guilt-inducing look I remembered from childhood. I looked at Ruby, who was staring at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Then back at Mom, who was nodding along with everything Tom said. They were serious. They were actually, seriously expecting me to hand over my apartment, the home I'd worked my ass off for, the place I'd poured my heart into, just like that. You've got to be kidding me, I said, my voice shaking. Don't be greedy, Anna, Tom snapped. Family helps family. That's when something inside me snapped. Family? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Are you seriously going to sit there and talk to me about family? Anna, Mom started, reaching for my hand. Of course you're family. That's why we're asking. No, I cut her off, standing up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Don't you dare sit there and pretend I'm family when it's convenient for you. Where was this family talk when you threw me out at 6 years old? Mom's face went white. I didn't throw you out. You gave me away, I was shouting now, years of hurt pouring out. You chose him, I pointed at Tom, who was turning an interesting shade of purple, over your own daughter. You shipped me off to Grandma and Grandpa because your new husband didn't want to deal with someone else's kid. Now listen here, Tom started to stand. No, you listen, I cut him off. I bought that apartment with my money, that I earned from my job, that I got with my education. And there is no way in hell I'm giving it to you people. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my whole body shaking. The next few weeks after that disastrous dinner were unsettling. I kept seeing things out of the corner of my eye, a familiar figure lurking in the parking garage, someone who looked suspiciously like Tom hanging around the building entrance. But every time I turned to look directly, there was nobody there. Then I got the email from work. My boss wanted me to come to headquarters for a week of meetings about a new project. It was a great opportunity, the kind that could lead to a promotion. Still, something felt off about leaving my apartment. You're being ridiculous, I muttered, packing my suitcase. What's the worst that could happen? I should have listened to my gut. The business trip itself was great. Productive meetings, networking opportunities, even a fancy dinner with the executive team. But when I got back home, exhausted from my flight, dragging my suitcase behind me, that's when my whole world turned upside down. My key wouldn't work in the lock. I tried again, thinking maybe I was just too tired and doing it wrong. Nothing. The lock was completely different, a new one installed over my deadbolt. What the hell? I whispered, my heart starting to race. I pressed the doorbell, then started pounding on the door with my fist. Hello? What's going on? This is my apartment. The door swung open, and there stood Ruby, looking completely at home in my home. Oh good, you're finally back, she said casually, like this was totally normal. Your timing's perfect actually, we just finished packing up your stuff. I stood there, mouth open, unable to process what I was seeing. Ruby was wearing pajamas, my pajamas, and behind her, I could see my furniture had been rearranged. What are you doing in my apartment? I finally managed to sputter. I live here now, she said, examining her nails. Your things are all boxed up in the spare room. You should take them soon, I don't really like your taste in furniture. We're going to redecorate. You what? I screamed. How did you even get in here? This is breaking and entering. Ruby rolled her eyes. Don't be so dramatic. It's done now, so just take your stuff and go. Are you insane? I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police right now. Oh, I wouldn't do that, Ruby smirked. I already called Mom and Dad. They're on their way over. I heard them before I saw them, angry footsteps stomping down the hallway, Tom's voice already raised. When they rounded the corner, the scene would have been almost comical if it wasn't so terrifying. Tom in front, red-faced and puffing, Mom scurrying behind him trying to keep up. Get out of the way, Tom barked at me, trying to push past into my apartment. I planted myself firmly in the doorway. What the hell do you think you're doing? What we had to do, he sneered. Since you were too selfish to do the right thing, we had to take matters into our own hands. Now move aside and let us finish moving Ruby in. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sheer audacity of it made my head spin. Are you actually serious right now? I looked at my mother, who was hovering behind Tom. Mom, are you really okay with this? Breaking into my home? Changing my locks? Don't be so dramatic, Anna, Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. We're trying to help Ruby start her family. Since you wouldn't cooperate, we had to push you toward the right decision. The right decision? I felt hysterical laughter bubbling up in my throat. The right decision was breaking and entering? The right decision was literally trying to steal my home? It's not stealing, Tom cut in, his voice dripping with condescension. It's redistributing resources within the family. You're single, you work remotely, you can live anywhere. Ruby needs this place more than you do. That's when I'd had enough. My hand was already pulling out my phone. Get out, get Ruby, get her things, and get out right now, or I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare, Tom growled, taking a step toward me. I started dialing, holding the phone up so they could see. 911. My finger hovered over the call button. The next few minutes were chaos. Tom and Mom rushed into the apartment, cursing and shouting as they gathered Ruby's hastily unpacked belongings. Ruby was crying, Mom was alternating between begging me to be reasonable and calling me horrible names, and Tom was spewing threats and profanities I'd never even heard before. You'll regret this, he snarled as they finally left, dragging Ruby's suitcase behind them. You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job and your fancy apartment? You're nothing but a lonely, pathetic. The door slammed behind them, cutting off the rest of his tirade. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall to sit on the floor, shaking. But it wasn't over. The messages started coming that night. First just a few, then a constant stream of them from Mom. How could you do this to your own sister? You're breaking my heart all over again. You've always been selfish, just like your father. Ruby is pregnant and needs a home, what kind of person are you? You'll die alone in that big empty apartment, no husband, no kids, nothing but your money to keep you warm at night. Each message was like a knife to the heart, but they also made me angry. Really angry. Something wasn't adding up about this whole pregnancy story. Why was Ruby acting so casual about it? Why hadn't she mentioned it once during this whole confrontation? I opened up social media and started digging. It didn't take long to find Ruby's boyfriend's profile, a guy named Mike who worked as an engineer. His profile was public, filled with photos of him and Ruby looking happy together. Nothing about a pregnancy. Nothing about marriage. Nothing about being unable to afford a place to live. My hand shook as I typed out a message to him. Hi Mike, this is Ruby's sister Anna. We need to talk. It's important. We arranged to meet the next day at a coffee shop downtown. I spotted Mike easily at the coffee shop. He looked exactly like his photos, tall with kind eyes. He was already at a table with 2 coffees waiting. I sat down, my stomach in knots. Listen, Mike, I need to tell you something crazy that's been happening. His face grew increasingly concerned as I laid it all out, the dinner, the demand for my apartment, the break-in attempt. When I finished, he looked stunned. Wait, they did what? He shook his head in disbelief. I had no idea about any of this. Ruby never mentioned wanting your apartment. Why would they even think I couldn't afford a place? I've got a good job, my own apartment. I've been independent for years. I took a deep breath. They said Ruby was pregnant and that you two were getting married. Mike's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Pregnant? He set the cup down carefully. Anna, Ruby's not pregnant. We've never even talked about marriage. I mean, we've only been dating for 8 months. The pieces all fell into place. The whole thing, the pregnancy, the desperate need for an apartment, the poor struggling boyfriend story, it was all a lie. They'd made up this entire elaborate story just to try to steal my apartment. I can't believe this, Mike said, running his hands through his hair. I'm so sorry they dragged you through this. And dragged me into it too, apparently. I need to talk to Ruby about this right away. The next day, my phone started ringing. Ruby's name flashed on the screen. How dare you? Ruby's voice exploded through the speaker before I could even say hello. How dare you go behind my back to talk to Mike? You did this on purpose, you're just jealous because I have a boyfriend and you don't. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to ruin my life. Ruin your life? I was practically screaming now. You tried to steal my home. You and Mom and Tom made up this whole ridiculous story. We wouldn't have had to if you weren't such a selfish. I hung up. The calls and messages started flooding in immediately, from Ruby, from Mom, from Tom. I blocked them all, one by one. But Mom wouldn't give up that easily. She started showing up at my apartment, sometimes crying, sometimes yelling, sometimes trying to guilt-trip me into letting her in. Please, Anna, she'd call through the door. We need to talk about this as a family. Family, that word again. They only seemed to remember I was family when they wanted something from me. After the 5th time she showed up unannounced, I blocked her number too. Then her email. Then every social media account they had. One by one, I cut off every way they had to reach me, feeling both lighter and sadder with each block. Sitting in my beautiful apartment, I finally admitted the truth to myself, moving here had been a huge mistake. All those dreams about reconnecting with Mom, building a relationship with Ruby, becoming a real family, they were just that. Dreams. Fantasy. The reality was much uglier. I called my grandparents that night, telling them everything that had happened. Grandma listened quietly, then sighed. Oh, sweetheart, she said softly. I know you wanted things to be different with your mother. But sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. She was right. My real family was right here on the phone, the people who'd raised me, supported me, loved me unconditionally. I didn't need to chase after people who only saw me as a resource to exploit. The decision to sell came easily after that. I contacted a realtor the very next day, but I made sure to warn her about the situation. Listen, I told her, I need to tell you something important. My estranged family might show up here after the sale. They've already tried to break in once. The realtor, Sarah, took it seriously. I'll make sure to warn the new owners. We'll document everything, just in case. The apartment sold quickly. Turns out a lot of people want a luxury high-rise unit with a view. I found an even better place near my company's headquarters in another state. It was actually bigger than my old apartment, with a home office setup that was perfect for the times I wasn't working at the main office. 3 weeks after I'd moved, Sarah called me. You were right about your family, she said. They showed up today, making a huge scene in the lobby. Yelling, demanding to know where you'd gone, claiming they had a right to be there. My stomach clenched. What happened? The new owners threatened to call the police, and they scattered pretty quick after that. But Anna, you made the right choice getting out of there. She was right. In my new place, in my new city, I could finally breathe. I got into a routine, work at the office some days, from home others. Regular video calls with my grandparents, who were proud of how I'd handled everything. I even started dating someone I met at work, though I was taking it slow, still processing everything that had happened. Sometimes I wonder about Ruby, If she stayed with Mike after he found out about her lies, if she ever felt guilty about what they tried to do. Sometimes I think about Mom, wonder if she ever realizes what she lost when she chose her new family over her daughter, not once but twice. But mostly, I focus on the family I do have. My grandparents, who showed me what unconditional love really looks like. The friends who've become like siblings to me. The life I built for myself on my own terms. I'm done trying to win the approval of people who see me as nothing but a means to an end. Done trying to build bridges that only get burned. Done hoping for a mother's love that always comes with conditions. I'm just done. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.